One of the biggest issues that we have as moms and business owners is that we never have enough time. And if there's anything that I've learned over the years, one of the biggest ways to waste your time is to get stuck inside your head. And today we're talking all about how to stop beating yourself up and how to stop focusing on your failures. This may or may not surprise you, but most of my clients are high level, high achieving, established, wealthy businesswomen. They are also some of the most critical to themselves people. And so they are perfectionists, they are people pleasers. And what's crazy about this is a lot of it has served them. And I even group myself in with this because there is, when you are hypercritical of yourself, it can be under this mask or this layer of having really high standards. And high standards are good. High standards hold you to a higher level. High standards are how you evaluate how you are operating. And so in a lot of cases, our strengths can also be our weaknesses. The things that push us further can also be the things that destroy us internally. And I've had conversation after conversation with clients in all industries over the last 12 years. And this is a constant, no matter what level, what industry, what revenue you have, how many team members you have. This is something that we all experience just as humans. And I think it's even more common in us humans who are devoted to creating and building something bigger. So we're going to talk today about how you need to stop beating yourself up and why you need to stop focusing on the things that don't work and the failures that you have. Last week, I talked about something that didn't work for me and something that didn't work for my business and a vision that I had that was lost. And I walked you through what happened and how I came out on the other side of that and turned that into a positive and what I'm doing about it moving forward. And that's what I want to teach you guys how to do today, because again, it is the biggest waste of time to get stuck in your head. And truthfully, these negative thought spirals that we have, these critical, unhelpful things that we tell ourselves or about our work, these kill our dreams. These kill our potential. And that's why if there's one thing that you can change that will greatly impact where you go, how far you go, what you're able to do in this lifetime, the thing that you need to change is your thoughts, the way you are thinking. And that is because everything that is created externally stems from that place. When you beat yourself up, when you are unkind to yourself, when you focus on the ways in which you are not enough or the ways that you have failed, what happens is you make yourself smaller. For a lot of people, this will show up in a feeling of being frozen, in a feeling of paralysis. You will avoid things. You will almost go into hiding. And in that moment, it feels like a protection technique. It feels like, I don't want anybody to see this. I don't want to feel this because there's shame around it, because we haven't lived up to our standards in some way, shape, or form. And the issue with this is when we are smaller, when we make ourselves smaller, when we have this pattern of something happening and then spending too much time focusing on all the things we did wrong, we then put ourselves in this position of being frozen or hiding, and it causes a reduction of our visibility, which then is a reduction of our impact. And so I see this a lot with business owners when you can almost see whether that's on their marketing channels or just how they're showing up, where it's like they pull back completely from showing up when things are hard. And the things that are hard, obviously there's different circumstances, but usually these things are happening in their heads. And so it's not that something real didn't happen, it's just it's being made bigger, if you will, by the thought spiraling, all the thoughts spiraling in their head. And so when we think about our commitment that we make as business owners, you make a commitment as a business owner and as an entrepreneur to innovate and to create change and to create impact. That should be the purpose behind what you're doing. And when we are so in our heads about what we didn't do well or how we didn't meet our own expectations, and we make ourselves small, we stop showing up for the people who need us. And so it's important to remember that when you're in this hard time in your head, when you're spiraling, when you're hearing these thoughts, it's important that we don't spend so much time there that it reduces us. Not to mention this consistent pattern of something happening, us taking it personally, making ourselves smaller, disappearing, and then having to come back out is honestly exhausting. And so I am not in any way, shape, or form telling you to not validate your emotions or not spend time feeling your feelings, because it's actually quite the opposite of what you need to be doing. What I am telling you is that you need to be conscious of how much time you're spending in your head and in your thoughts, and have a process, which I'm going to talk about today, in which you can pull through and become proactive from whatever happened. So I talk a lot about reactivity and reacting to all of these things that are getting thrown around us. And I've done podcast episodes on how to become more responsive instead of reactive as well. But in this case, when we know that well, we know that the pattern is the stimulus being something that makes us feel less than, and that feeling of less than then leading us down a path that we are then making ourselves smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, therefore disappearing, therefore, feeling shame, therefore sitting in this pool of defeat or victimhood or whatever it may be. We always have a choice of how long we sit there and how far we go into that spiral. And I want to remind you of that because, again, I'm trying to prevent you from wasting time on things that are going to take away from your potential and your impact. If we want to be better in our businesses and be better leaders, we have to learn how to process, feel, and move in a way that is most aligned and in a way that is connected with where we want to go. If we keep teetering and wavering on the line of, I'm not enough, now I'm small, now I can't speak up, now I can't apply for that thing, now I can't try that thing, now I can't sell that thing, now I can't show up for that thing. If we stay there, or then we are like, okay, I got this boost of energy and now I feel like I'm enough, so now I'm going to do it. And then all of a sudden something happens and we get small again. This is a pattern we want to break. That being said, there is absolutely no way that we can change external circumstances that could be the stimulus for this response for us, this response of making ourselves smaller. However, we can change what our response is. And so when we think about the process of how we respond, and I want you to think about the last time that something happened that it made you want to disappear, or that you really just became very withdrawn, or you stopped showing up like you wanted to in your business. I want you to think about what that stimulus was. And then I want you to think about how long you spent there and how long it truly affected you, and what were your thoughts during that time period. And it's important for you to have awareness around this because we want to change that pattern. We want to change what the response is. We want to change how long we spend in this, in our thoughts and in our head, because we can lengthen or shorten the spiral. And that's something that we forget that we have control over. And so in order to shorten the spiral, what we need to do is we need to be able to humanize ourselves. We need to be able to extend the grace that we extend to other people outside of us to ourselves. Why is it that somebody could show up 5 minutes late for a call and you give them nothing but warmth and understanding because there was traffic or something happened with their kid? But if you're 5 minutes late, you spend the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes that you're there worried about the person being mad at you instead of being present in the moment. And this is the differentiation that really matters. So now I want you to think about ways in which you treat others or ways in which you treat your children when they make mistakes. Because something you should know about leadership and parenting is that actions speak louder than words. And while you may not beat up your children when they make mistakes, if you're beating yourself up for every single mistake in front of your children, they're going to adopt that pattern, and so will your team. And so it's important to think through, what are the ways in which you respond to others? What are the ways in which you extend compassion and grace to others? And what are the exact words or feelings that you feel in your body when you're giving that? And how can you replicate that for yourself? Because given the opportunity, when something happens and there is a stimulus that makes you want to withdraw and beat yourself up, your challenge will be to validate the emotion of sadness or grief or failure or shame or whatever the emotion is that comes in for you, to validate that emotion and then meet it with compassion and grace so that you can then create a proactive response. So currently, your process when you make a mistake or fail is to feel like shit, be really mean to yourself, and then spend hours, days, weeks, months, years in your head about that mistake that you made, resulting in a loss of impact and potential. Your new process is to have a failure or a mistake, to hear and be aware and validate whatever the initial emotions are that come in, and then to have awareness on the thoughts that follow, to be able to challenge those thoughts and meet them with compassion and grace. So if you're saying to yourself, you're such an idiot, you would hear that thought and challenge it with, you tried something new that was scary and that was hard, and you should be very proud of that, because most people don't have the courage to try. And it is only when you meet yourself with that compassion and grace that then you're able to process and move through instead of sitting in that pool of defeat. I don't want you sitting there because I don't want you leaving potential and opportunity on the table. One of the best books that I've ever read is by Dr. Kristen Neff, and the book is called Self-Compassion. And it is all about exactly what the title is. And the extent and the detail that she goes into about self-compassion and everything that it's connected to, and everything it creates when we don't give it, and everything that it creates when we do give it to ourselves, is absolutely fascinating. And in the book, she has this equation, and it is suffering equals pain times resistance. Suffering equals pain times resistance. And this is exactly what that pool of defeat is. It is suffering. It is defeat. It is feeling like everything is happening to you. And it is the pain, the very real pain that needs to be validated, that has come in from whatever stimulus or circumstance that occurred, but only when it is met with resistance. And the resistance is you being unwilling to validate your emotions, either by suppressing them or searching for unhealthy coping mechanisms that are not actually coping. For most of you, that would be distracting yourself by being busy, putting more work on your plate, just shifting your focus elsewhere, recognizing that you feel shame or sadness or grief or whatever it is, and then looking away from it. And this is an important equation to remember, because remember what I just said about the process that you need to shift into requires validation of the emotion that you feel first. It is then that we remove resistance. We remove the suppression of the emotion. We remove the thoughts of us telling ourselves we're not allowed to feel that or look at that or be that. So I want you to remember this new process, and I want you to practice it on a regular basis, be it big or small. You drop something on the floor, right? How do you respond when you drop something? What an idiot. Or, oops, I dropped something, because I'm a human and humans drop things. Two drastically different responses. And so it's really great when we can practice things on a smaller scale and a bigger scale, because when we practice things on a smaller scale, when something that is heavier or harder comes in, we have some good practice. We have the habit built, or the pattern or the process built already. There's a drastic difference between awareness and spiraling. And having awareness of your thoughts and hearing your thoughts and challenging those thoughts is awareness. Spiraling is when you are aware of the thoughts, but you're letting the thoughts control you. You're letting the thoughts continue without responding to them, without challenging them. And that's why I say this when I'm talking about so many different things, is like, what is happening in your head is the most important thing you can pay attention to, because it does truly determine who you become and what you do in this lifetime. So here's how you're going to stop beating yourself up and focusing on your failures. First and foremost, you are going to just humanize yourself. You're going to change your standards and your expectations to make them realistic and aligned with who you are, rather than trying to meet either society standards or maybe even your parents or caregivers that were put upon you. You have the freedom to change and redefine these standards at any moment in time. You have the freedom to define what your expectations of yourself are at any time. And sometimes we're not even clear on what those expectations are, and we're just carrying whatever we think they should be based upon our past experiences. This could be past leadership that we've been under. This could be, again, parents, caregivers. And so it's important that we're like, what is it that I actually expect of myself? How do I expect myself to handle failures and mistakes? What does that look like? So humanizing yourself is the most important thing that you can do. The second thing is you need to make sure that you're validating emotions to be able to move through this process. The process that I taught you here today only works with validation first. So you're aware of the thoughts, you're aware of the feelings, and then you validate those feelings because they are real. They are real to you. And while feelings are not facts, feelings are still real and need to be validated. That is really hard, what you just went through. You're speaking to yourself as you would speak to somebody else. You wouldn't tell somebody else not to feel their feelings. And when you validate, then you can move to that more proactive response. So again, that process is, there is a stimulus, there is a circumstance that triggers the previous response of making you smaller. And instead, we're going to move through by being aware of the emotions, validating the emotions with compassionate language. Then we are going to challenge any thoughts that follow that would make you smaller. And then we're going to move into something proactive. What would help you, proactive and positive? What would help you to feel happier? What would be a situation in which this would be a good ending for you? A great example of this is on the last podcast, how I talked about my retreat and how I had to end it early. And my process, this is the exact process that I went through. At the end of that, the question that I asked myself was, what would make this feel like it wasn't a waste? What would make this feel like you did the best that you could? What would make this end on a happy note? And that answer was for us to pick another date and time and get another opportunity to do the retreat again. And so asking yourself, but you can only get to that proactive place and ask those questions once you have validated the emotions and once you have challenged thoughts and used compassionate language. And last and final, I want you to be able to shift your perspective around mistakes and failures. Everything is only as we see it, meaning that you can change your lenses at any time. If you are letting failures and mistakes mean that you are less of a person, then that's what you believe. And so every time you fail or make a mistake, you will feel like less of a person. But if instead we humanize ourselves and we say failure is a part of the process, failure is something I can expect, and failure is something that makes me better. Failure is where I learn my greatest lessons. Failure is where my greatest achievements are born. Failure is the place that shows me the gaps that need to be filled that I can then fill and create to my greatest potential. Failures are opportunities. This is a shift in perspective. The way we view failure has to change. The way we have shame around failure has to change. And we change that by shifting our perspective and putting different language around what failure is and what it means and what it does. I hope that today that you feel a sense of accomplishment in knowing you have a new way to challenge your thoughts, to face your failures, and to work through things so that you don't make yourself invisible, but instead you say, I'm human and I get to try again. And if you are running your business and you feel like that your thoughts are affecting your leadership, if you recognize that you need to structure your business and your life in a different way to promote sustainability and longevity, and you're tired of being tired and your business taking away from you, please book a call with me today so we can talk about what working together for you and for your business can do for you. And so I can learn more about your business and more about you and teach you all these different tools and techniques and practices, not just for yourself, but for your business that will make you a better leader, a better mother, better partner, and just a better human overall. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.